Okay, so Shari, let's go ahead. Before I even introduce this conversation, tell us about, you got a package from someone on the Discord. Let's hear about this.
This is the intro.
This is a conversation about wherever this conversation goes, just because I've been so laden with work that I actually wanted to talk about something that wasn't related to public disclosure.
It's show and tell. Show and tell. Okay, well, what's cool about this package was I had no idea what was in it. And something that the Lord has been speaking to me about lately has been my own prayer life. And the whole package was prayer. So there was this cute little thing in here with praying hands, you see. And then there was a book of Orthodox prayers, which I have one, but this is nicer. And then a little notebook to write things down, and an Orthodox catechism book. So
I want a package like that.
I didn't even know there was such a thing as a catechism book. So yeah, that was my gift, and from someone who will remain anonymous. And also I got my very first Orthodox cross, which I really wanted.
Nice.
Yeah, so that was my little gift. Very nice.
That's very cool. That's very cool. And it was almost a response to prayer in and of itself. So that's really neat, Shari. Glad to see that you're feeling better.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
coming.
So this is the thing that I kind of wanted to talk about, but I mean, I'm open to wherever the conversation goes, of course. So Chloe Valdere had this tweet, this was just the last part of a long thread. I'm just going to read the part that I thought was particularly salient to me because of what I've been thinking about. So she said, also, understanding sacred to mean inexhaustibleness, which affords us a sense of renewability, as opposed to sacred, which means perfection, which is a form of idolatry, both in the moral and literal sense. An idol is fixed, static, perfect, and therefore dead.
Mm.
To which I responded, the infinite is paradoxically contained within the finite. And he got into the boat with them, and the wind ceased, and they were utterly astounded, for they did not understand about the loaves, but their hearts were hardened. Mark 6:51 and 52. That is from the English Standard Version. My son would approve that I chose to quote from a Anglican preferred Bible.
Well, it's also accepted by all the young, restless, and reformed, the ESV.
Right.
So,
yeah. Well, yeah, the Anglican are, because they're Reformed and Catholic,
right.
Somehow that, I don't know how that works.
Let's not go down that path. Shari, go ahead.
Well, I'm just, I don't understand the statement that she made about the sacred being, comparing the sacred with idolatry. Maybe you could expand on that for me, because I read that earlier, and
she was saying that the idea of the sacred as the perfect,
Okay.
trying to put it in, trying to lock it into stasis is akin to idolatry, because it's trying to fix. It's trying to pin God down effectively.
What's a really good example of someone doing that, taking something sacred and pinning it down? Can you think of one?
Propositional Christianity as a whole.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
In fact, the irony is it does it out of a fear of idolatry.
Yeah.
But it doesn't know what idolatry is.
Christ and Antichrist. That's all there is. The only reason it's tricky is because it's Antichrist and it looks like Christ. You think you're following Christ and it's not. Yeah. No, I agree. It's any form of rationalism that makes God. It's an elevation of law over spirit, you know, formula over life, any of that stuff. And so before we started, to take it in a slightly different route, and the first time you ever mentioned, I don't remember when it was, I was going to say a couple months ago. My sense of time is terrible. So it's probably a month ago, 2 weeks, who knows?
Yeah, who knows, right?
But you brought up this text and just gave kind of your general idea about it, about the finitude containing infinity, because then that's a riff on, I mean, it's not a riff on, but it's very tied to that statement that Peugeot made. I forget which conversation it was, but it's a prominent Peugeot statement that stands out in my mind when he said the expression of the most important thing about Christianity is the expression of the infinite is also infinite, which I think there's a lot there. And before we started recording, I said that statement reminds me of something that Rob Bell has said a lot, which is, do we live in a universe, or you could also say, like, is our God the God of scarcity or the God of abundance?
Right. Yeah.
I
And
think
that's when I first mentioned this. And when I first mentioned, I think it was actually, it wasn't that, I don't think it was, I think it was maybe even less than a month ago. Because I remember the reason that verse, like I had that verse is like, that's the verse that came up for like my morning Lectio Divina. And I'd never really thought about that verse at all. And then it's like, it just dawned on me, like in that session, as I was contemplating it, it's like, oh, this is about this paradox that somehow the finite contains the infinite, which is what the mystery of Christ is. It's it's a finite human vessel that's containing the infinite. And it's really from the context of the verse, like, and if you think about what has just happened, it's like they're on the boat because Jesus just appeared to them walking on the water, which is an act of which is a finite, like demonstrating the infinite act, and he's just fed 4,000 with the loaves and fishes, which and he specifically says they didn't understand about the loaves. It's like
well, so this is what I want to ask you, because I think I've always taken, not particularly this verse, because I don't think I've thought about the immediacy of how that just puts things right next to each other, and it seems weird. And I suppose I've always taken that in the past as, well, this is just like a proof text that Jesus is God. You know, they didn't believe about the loaves, so Jesus is God. But I think it's much more than that. It is
because you could have picked any number of things. You could have, like, why is it specifically the loaves they didn't understand about that? Like, I think, you could have said they didn't understand about, like, you know, the healing of the blind, or they didn't understand. You could have said they didn't understand about any number of things, but specifically the thing that they didn't understand was about the loaves.
Right, which isn't just like a proof text saying, oh, he's God. It's about the nature of reality. Because I think it's about icons. Like that's essentially what it's about, is the finite contains the infinite. Everything contains the infinite. And this is what this gets at, like, kind of that
if we're going to talk about if you're going to talk about the eschaton being God being all in all, that's what it has to be. Right. And it has to be already the case, and just it has to be already the case, but just not available to our vision.
We're in a state of betrothal, waiting for the consummation.
Well, right. That's. Go ahead, Shari.
Well, so what the infinite being contained in the finite is essentially the incarnation, which is Christ.
Yes.
Right. Who is the icon of the invisible God. Yes. Which is why I'm just trying to follow the line of thought, which is why, Luke, you're ending up at iconography, right?
Oh. Yes, but everything, I think,
and the reason he is because it's about vision. Like it really is. It's like that's what we can't see.
Yeah.
That's what we
But-
don't have eyes to see, and we don't have ears to hear. Is that's the somehow that's the thing that we can't accept.
But everything's that way. It's not just Christ. The loaves are that way.
Right.
There's infinite loaves in the loaves.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's
Right.
infinite fishes
Nice.
in the fish.
Right. There's that right. Scarcity is an illusion.
Right. But I was
Yeah.
saying to Nate before we started, like this touches on tons of things, modern economics and supply and demand,
Right.
and wars come from scarcity. And I'm fearful that like I may not, this gets into like the Beatitudes and consider the lilies. Doesn't the Lord provide for them? Well, they're not scared. They can't eat tomorrow.
Well, it relates directly to our obsession with quantity, because the reason we
Yes.
can't see it is because we continue to try to think of it in quantitative terms.
Yes.
But that's
Yeah.
not where it's found.
But it's also perception. Like that's why we're afraid, right? It's a like, I think it's a false perception. Yeah, I just said that, but now I can't.
No, go ahead. Follow that thread, Sherry.
Well, because you're talking about vision, right? So, and Luke said you both said, you can't see it. So, and then you jump directly into fear, and that's where fear comes from. It comes from your perception, right? It comes from the lack of seeing, right? The lack of seeing the infinite in the loaves, for example. So you think, I only have 5, they're only going to last me this many days, and then I'm going to die. Right? Like that's what you would think,
Right.
because your perception would tell you that. But the reality is that the loaves are infinite, right? Like that the infinite is contained within the finite. Like, and that's why Jesus can say, consider the lilies of the field, right? And not sound like, I mean, nobody really knows what to do with those verses, because they're just too idealistic. It sounds like some hippy dippy, person, right? But I mean, if I draw on my own experience, I often think, like, I often say to people, will say to me, how do you survive? Like, because my husband and I have tried really hard not to work outside of our home, right? And just work at home, and only work enough to cover our basic needs. Like, we had a family of 5, and I think we lived on 20,000 a year.
Oh my.
Yeah, for a long time. And we lived well, and people would say, well, how do you do that? And I'd say, well, my father owns the cattle on 1,000 hills.
Mm.
And I meant it, because it just seemed
Right.
like whenever things would get crunchy, then something would come along. And it wasn't like people were bringing us food baskets or anything like that. It was just, it was God, Yeah, you'd have a good year, you'd have a bumper crop, I don't know, some deer would slam itself into the side of your truck, and then you'd have food for the next, couple of weeks. And it was just things like that. Like, I don't even, yeah. Anyway.
So just going back to the verse again, like, why do you think that the particular phrasing is that their hearts were hardened? It's not that they couldn't believe it, right?
No,
Their hearts
no,
were
they,
hardened. Why that
yeah.
particular?
Well, the only thing I think of there is Maximus talks about the hardening of Pharaoh's heart.
Well, is it? I would say it has to do something. Some love is the source of all plenitude, right? Because that's like God. That's what God's essence is, and that's how creation happens in the first place. So if you to understand the mystery of how the paradoxically the infinite is contained within the finite is to understand the mystery of love, which is to understand the mystery of God, right? So
Yeah.
and love is in love, there can be no scarcity.
Well, there can't, I mean, like, let's be honest. I mean, there can be, right? Like, you can suffer. You can still suffer as a Christian. You can suffer.
But that represents a failing of love somewhere, though. If you're, and you
Well,
may not be,
wouldn't
may
wanna-
not, there's still a fail, right? If
Yeah, but then that's going to lead you right into prosperity gospel.
no, I'm not suggesting that because that's assuming that assumes that we're that material that we're only talking about material need.
Okay, so what are we talking about then?
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out. I don't have any answers. I'm just trying to ask you questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. I think that it's more of this feminine expression of a correct posture to God, which is the Theotokos, which is Mary, which is the let it be, which is the yes to God. And so even when you're saying this, because I agree, Shari, with what you're saying, there may be times of scarcity, but then St. Paul, is it, I'm gonna say Philippians. I don't know. It's one of those epistles where he says, I have learned contentment, whether in abundance or in scarcity, or in life or in death or anything. That passage where he talks about learning contentment, and it makes me think of Franz Jägerstätter in A Hidden Life, where he's sitting there imprisoned and Malik is portraying these things, and he's saying, and the lawyer comes in to tell him, like, just do this and you'll be free and you can live out the war and you can do this and you can be a medic. And he's just like, I am free. Mm-hmm. And the walls of the prison just turn into meadows and rivers and things. And so it's a valuing of the eternal things, and maybe even in scarcity.
But is it really a scarcity though? That's the question I'm asking.
No,
yeah,
not scarcity, but it is a worldly, fleshly scarcity, and so it's almost more
right.
like, I think of the.
Okay, so this actually means that now the world is enchanted, Nate. Right?
Tell me more.
Because and that's what happens when you have this attitude, like Franz Jägerstätter, right? Yes. Is that the walls become meadows, like the world becomes enchanted, right? And you move through something, which is what iconography is. Yeah. The wall is not something, it's not the wall anymore, right? And you are free.
The immanent becomes transcendent, immanently transcendent.
Right. Yeah.
Yes. The final.
And it's only through that. It's only through that. Well, I tend to think that beauty is the portal that leads you into enchantment.
Right. And I think that
there's beauty there. Well, where's the beauty in that? That would be my question. Like, where's the beauty in, like, Franz Jägerstätter's existence in a prison? The beauty is that the beauty is goodness and truth, probably. Right? But that he's being true and good to his convictions.
His contentment, his peace. I don't even think that it's like, if you watch that movie, it's not that he is somehow, and I'm not saying you're saying this, Shari, but it's not somehow that he is smug, like in his feels, and he's just like, I'm doing the right thing. Like, that's not at all what's happening in that movie. He's
experiencing the beauty of living in integrity, walking in integrity.
Yes.
That's what he's experiencing. And that's where he goes into the enchanted world.
Yeah. Because he's not looking for any sort of, and people, like, don't hear this as like a man-centered thing, but he's not looking for external validation.
Right.
No.
He has the validation in here, but it's a noetic Christ in me validation. Like, I don't need to listen to this lawyer and his logicking, and I don't need to listen to like this idea and this system and this, and it's back to that scarcity thing. He understood the loaves and the fishes.
Yeah.
Well, I had a thought the other day about this, like, because we've talked about the natural will and the gnomic will, right? And the natural will is the will that just tends towards the good, like it doesn't deliberate.
Mhm.
This is Maximus says that Jesus didn't have the gnomic will because he didn't have to deliberate, right? His will was oriented towards the Father at all times. The gnomic will is the will that is confronted with the lawyer, let's say, in Franz Jägerstätter's situation. The natural will is the one that leads him to see the meadows in the walls, right? So, I lost my train of thought.
No, that was good, Shari.
I think that, well, what I thought about the other day was, if you have to deliberate about something, then you're probably not operating in that vein, right? We and I don't want to say that every impulsive move is a good thing. That's not what I'm saying, but
Right.
there is a right orientation, and moving in. I just think that if you are moving towards the good, you won't necessarily be confronted with the deliberation. And this is why I think Franz Jägerstätter isn't concerned with what the lawyer is talking about. It's redundant, right? Because his will is already oriented towards something else. Anyway, it's just.
Well, he has no fear.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
If, like, to me, like, fear is a big part of this. Like,
yeah,
fear is somehow related to our inability to see how the finite is capable of participating in the infinite. So it's like it's fear that, and I don't. I think it's like I think it's more properly like let's take the example of like when Peter starts to sink when Jesus calls him out on the water. It's like he notices the waves, right?
Yeah.
So he sees he sees the reality and begins to fear, and that's what causes him like that. To me, like, the fear is more like there's some connection between like there's some connection between fear and this failure to see, like yeah, I don't have a better way of expressing it. We tend to, what I'm saying is that we tend to focus on, oh, well, he didn't have faith, but what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
But what do you mean by that? Like, somehow, like, there's a strong connection. There's a strong connection somehow between, I don't know if it's between, I don't know if there's a connection between faith and courage, or between like fear and doubt, or I'm not sure, but there's a connection here. And you're the first one who brought up fear, and like that resonated with me. And it's like yeah. So I guess I'm not making any sense. I'm struggling to articulate it. Public disclosure, mush brain. Too much work.
I think fear is an obvious hindrance in vision, because when you approach someone who's in fear, they don't perceive you again, right?
I think I've got it. I think let me give me just one moment. I think I know where the link is. So I think we would all agree that there's a connection between faith and trust, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you fear that which you trust? To me that seems like an impossible equation.
No, I don't think you can fear it.
And I know that's going to get a bunch of people saying like, but fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. But
Oh,
I don't think that's not what that means. It's a fear is a bad translation. That's not really what we're talking about. I can see your wheel spinning, Luke.
well, so with the whole fear thing, so we're trying to connect fear with, what was it again?
Trust.
Trust. And whether or not, well, I mean, I think fear is almost, I mean, back to what Shari was saying with No McWill, fear is a deliberation between options.
Yeah.
And it's saying, well, this bad thing that I don't like could happen. But then I think if you bring it back to kind of the loaves and the finitude containing infinity, I think another way to say that is, or another facet of the same coin is maybe unity and multiplicity. So even if you consider it like there are these options and there are these things that could happen, or even back to the scarcity thing, like and St. Paul, whether in abundance or in need, or whether in jail or in plenty, I've learned contentment. He has seen the unity and the multiplicity amidst all those different scenarios, right? Like I can be in want, or I can be in plenty, or I can be whatever. God is all in all of these things. And so fear is saying, I want this, but not this. But if God is present in all of those things, and if you are in the mode of let it be, I'm not in control, you're in control, whatever you have for me, like I'm willing to enter into it, then wherever you are, God is there. And so you don't have to be frantic in trying to prevent this situation or this situation, or build bigger barns or whatever. You can live your life each day in almost kind of a, I don't know, the thing that comes to mind is the Ecclesiastes thing.
Yeah.
Because I was talking to my brother recently, who's um, just I guess without just airing all his stuff, he's at a much better place in his life than he had been in the past. And he said something to me the last time I saw him where he was just like, I've gotten to the place of um, just being very happy with going to work every day, doing my work, coming home, gardening, going to bed, and just doing that. With that, I'm content. I'm not always looking for this other thing. I'm not thinking about what's lacking. And I said, well, what you basically sound like is like the author of Ecclesiastes. Because that's his thing at the end of the day. And I think that's almost that is somewhat of the same attitude of the let it be attitude. Is I'm not working really hard to hedge my bets in this scarcity world where I'm really trying to control myself to go here or here. I'm
Yeah.
I'm doing I'm being a creature and allowing God to be God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I noticed that you kind of linked scarcity and fear there a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think for sure it is. Like I mean, the reason, because we touched on the lilies of the field and building bigger barns, and that the reason that one would build bigger barns, at least in this, and I'm not saying like that's 100% wrong, but in the vein that Jesus is talking about is a fear of scarcity. Like, what if this happens? What if this happens? I won't have enough. So we need to more. It reminds me of the millionaires. Like, what's the famous quote of like some billionaire who they asked, like, what drives you? And he's just like, one more dollar, or just one more thing. Like, it's just never, it's what Pete Rollins calls the lack, this
Right.
the beaten
Right.
pursuit of the lack.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So the lack, right. So, okay. This is good. This is good. So scarcity, lack, and then you have Augustine's idea of evil as privatio boni, right? And then we have
Deprivation.
this sort of like this culture that we've created that is like, that is constantly driven to accumulate more, to fill or to fill a void that can never be filled. Like it seems like there's somehow these things are connected.
I'm not following the my Latin pronunciation is not as good as you. If anything, from the
Oh, it's just the idea that evil like evil has no positive being, that it's a privation of a good.
no,
It's a lack. It is a lack. It is a it's but it's not a. So I think which is kind of like, so it's like, so we think we're pursuing it. Okay. So in this sort of like pursuit of like the one more dollar, right?
yeah.
We think that we're pursuing a good, right? I mean, the billionaire who thinks he needs, for some, like there's a good he's seeing in that dollar that he pursues.
No doubt. Yeah,
So he's
no.
not like, okay. So, and I'm totally thinking out loud here, because I actually like have I like just have like this intuition of like wanting to connect things that I don't know that I can articulate the connection between, but like I think
Well,
it somehow go ahead.
I mean, I think that the lack, this how did I had a thought. It's the pursuit of the lack
Right.
that is actively sinning, because sin is the missing the mark, right? So to pursue the lack is actually to miss the whole point, which is what ends up happening when you do that. Like you're never satisfied when you just keep collecting one more dollar, right?
Well, because there is no lack. That's the thing. It's like,
Right.
it's not real.
Well,
evil isn't real.
so Nate, connect
I mean,
this.
not ultimately.
Yeah.
This is our render unto Caesar conversation.
Yes, exactly. And and I'm trying to actually link these together. Yes, this is precisely it. I also, and I just want to I know that I've got enough balls in the air here, but this is the kind of conversation this one is. I want to throw one more ball in the air, because while Shari was talking, I couldn't help but think of like, you guys have seen The Never Ending Story, right?
Yes.
No.
Okay, so the nothing and the never ending story, that's that's kind of like the image that I have that I have of this. It's like it's it itself is not real, but wants to destroy that which is real, to make it a
Relax.
nothing, like it is a nothing.
What's so interesting is this, I don't know, I feel like we're on the verge of connecting a lot of dots.
I know.
Yeah.
I can feel it's like I can actually feel it, and it's like, oh, it's just like, it's so elusive. But
So
yeah, I know. Yeah.
We've talked a lot. We have discussed before how Satan may be using technology and AI and machines and things to basically be building a body for himself as Antichrist, which has no being. I mean, we've talked about that. That's like this body of anti-being for his own manifestation.
Right.
And so there's something there where like this pursuit of the lack, which is tied to fear, which is tied to scarcity, which is also antichrist, because it's all of these people think they're doing good. Like you were saying, the billionaire who's pursuing another dollar is not doing that because he thinks it's an evil thing.
Right.
Like, I mean, this is where I would say, like, nobody, I don't know, people like to argue about this.
Everyone's filling a hole.
Right. Right. No one is knowingly doing evil. I mean, this is
Right.
Blaise Pascal. All men seek happiness.
They're filling a God-shaped hole with whatever it is that they think is going to fill that.
And that can be super, super twisted, right? And there can be a lot of brokenness there where it doesn't look like that, but everybody is ultimately pursuing. This is an assertion that I'm just.
No, it is true. That is like, it's in your nature.
I'm almost willing to die on this hill. Like you can't. The only reason you sin is through deception. So you're pursuing good, but you just don't see it correctly, and so you end up pursuing the non-good, thinking it's the good.
Yeah.
Well, I tend to think that everything, like, and I don't want to be reductive because, but I think that it's the difference between participating in being and possessing it, wielding it, right? So, pursuing the lack is thinking that you have control over filling the void in your own life. Like, it's a possession of it. Whereas considering the lilies of the valley, right? Living that kind of a life is participating with being itself, right? And allowing it to provide for you and not possessing it.
Well,
but working in tandem
because the real flows out of God, right? And it participates in God.
Yeah.
Which is love flowing out of love. So which refuses to be possessed.
Yes.
It can only exist in reciprocal gift exchange.
Right. It's like I can't
the minute you try to possess it, you destroy it.
Right. And the gifts stop coming just because you stop receiving them, actually. Right? Like they don't stop coming because they stop coming. They stop coming because
they never stop coming. They never stop coming. That's the illusion.
Right. And so this is the thing, like, this reminds me of Harding's 4 stages of life.
Yeah.
When he talks about the toddler, and the toddler who looks in the mirror and his parents say, "That's you, Bobby." And he goes, "Okay, well, I'll say that. I'll say yes to them. But to me, that's not me. That's my friend." Right?
Okay, Mom and Dad.
Yeah, okay. And then he runs outside and he's everything that he encounters. He's it. Right?
Right.
And then at teenagehood, which Harding says is where most people are actually, is when they're confronted with who they are and they reject it. Right? They become angry because they don't want to be that.
The divided man.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
Yeah. Yes. Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And then they think that that just the action of rejection indicates the ability to actually wield some kind of power, right? You think that if you reject something that you can reject it, but you can't, because it's you.
Right.
You are rejecting yourself.
Yes.
That's not possible.
Let's bring it.
So you're deceived.
Let's bring it back to the verse, because I want to make it more concrete. I don't know if this will do it, but it's more so they didn't consider the loaves and the fishes. And then the other part, the particular part of the loaves and the fishes that it makes me think of is when Jesus, all those people are gathered and Jesus sends the disciples out and they gather everything that's there. They bring him, like, I don't remember what the quantities are. Like, yeah,
but there's there's leftovers. It's the point. It overflows.
There's 3 loaves and a couple fishes. And then what does Jesus say? It is enough.
Yeah, it is enough.
Like, that's what he says. He says, it is enough. And so,
it is enough.
There's something about the perception the way of being, the way of seeing, the whatever in the world where Jesus, because here's the thing, Jesus was approached, like that's what happened, like whatever the quantities that were brought, I don't remember exactly what they were. Jesus saw it and said, like, that's good. Like,
Yeah.
we're golden. We're great. And I don't think he was like, I don't know. There's just something about that. Whereas like to a modern, you would bring that to us and like, what would our response be? We'd be like, it's not enough.
Yeah.
Like, that's clearly not enough.
Clearly
Right.
not enough. Yeah.
That's not going to do it. But then you have to ask yourself, like, is Jesus, I don't know. It's interesting because I feel like there's an anachronism going on where people read that and they say, well, Jesus knows he's going to create a miracle. And so like they map all of this framing onto the text that I don't know is intrinsic to the text. You know, they'll say like, Jesus knew he was going to do a miracle. He knew he was going to take this and turn it into this. And so, but what they're doing there is they're still thinking of everything quantitatively.
Yeah.
Right.
Which I think is completely missing the point.
Maybe we should talk about the qualitative aspects of that story then. And that might fish some, excuse the pun, but that might fish some of the spiritual aspects out of it, because I mean, what is the quality of the bread and the fish?
But isn't the quality that the finite contains the infinite? Like that's
that's what that miracle is telling
Peter,
you.
That's Peter walking on water.
Yes.
Like, we look at that and we say like, that doesn't work.
And that verse is actually connecting those two events together because it happens like it's on the boat.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying. It's like it couldn't possibly make itself more obvious as to the fact that it was talking about this paradox.
Yes. And this is
the finite somehow contains the infinite.
This is
okay, so
really radical, because I want to say, because there's a point in the Gospels where Jesus said, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can move mountains. And I think people read that and they think, again, they do an anachronism and they think Jesus is like, he's speaking in like a metaphor, he's using figurative language. No, I think what Jesus is saying is that if you have faith, and again, this isn't like I don't know how to, there's a certain response to what I'm going to say that I like, that I feel and I intuit and I know is going to be there. And this isn't what I'm saying. And I don't know how to say it in a way that's going to inhibit that reaction.
Just don't worry about the reaction. Just say it.
So I really believe if you have faith, like it's almost like, and this isn't something that you can will. It's not something that you can do. You can.
No, you can't will it.
No,
it's not. You don't possess it.
No, it's like so I've been reading this book on angels, right? And I was saying the other day that I think Christ's being made a little bit lower than the angels, and that eventually, and we are experiencing things in which angels long to look, and now Christ has been exalted to the throne, and at some point we are going to be in, I think at some point we are going to be in almost a superior role than even the angels have, mediating creation. That is through faith being made perfect.
I'll go even one further. I'm not sure that Mormon eschatology is wrong.
Well, we've been talking about that too.
Shout out to Tyler. What a great guy he is.
No, he is a really great guy, but it's not, I don't know. I've really, the angel book has been sending me for a loop because I don't know. I just see it so much more clearly that I've said this recently that I'm not so much I'm becoming less and less of a philosophical materialist, and having this mechanistic understanding of reality, and I'm becoming more and more an angelist, where I just like see everything that is mediated through angelic power, and or principalities or demons or whatever.
Right.
Just this Neoplatonic cascade of like angels. Like I just I think everything is personal and mediated by angels, or else it doesn't have being. But I think humans, like this is what's going to be, the creation is longing for the redemption of everything. And human beings, I think the whole point of human beings is for us to be the body of Christ, which would be then managing all of creation, mediating all of creation with Christ as his body. Like, I think that's the end goal of new creation. Like, that's what we're meant to be
But
doing.
I would say that part of the end, but in deference to the possibility that Mormon eschatology might not be wrong, and in deference to the idea of further up and further in, I would say that it is also implicit in new creation that new creation implies new creation.
Oh, for
I don't think creation is a process that ever
thing we like get our
it
own.
wants to end, because why would it? Like,
Well,
it's the infinite outpouring of infinite love. Why would it ever end?
yeah, it actually can't end.
Right.
Doesn't
Actually,
have
Tyler, if you watch this, I want you to comment on this, because is this what it means that we get our own planets and solar systems that we just
I used to. I actually I wrote a lot. I wrote a joke in a one act play that I wrote, where it was the one act play was on stage at the opening, and the opening scene of the play. It's like you have two you have it's two figures. One is dressed like the man from American Gothic, and the other is dressed like a woman from American Gothic. But it's also it's a male that's in the dress of the female too. And the characters, as the play moves forward, you realize the characters are Satan and Belphegor, the demon of sloth. And the demon of sloth is the one that's in drag. And like there's a line in the play that Belphegor says that is like, it's a multiverse. Don't you know that that the plan is to set up to set up franchises, make universes. The Mormons had it right. so
you're gonna win, Charlie. I also want you to comment on. Here's the thing: we're just like all Protestants are wrong, Mormons are right. Oh, jeez.
Are Mormons Protestants?
I mean, yeah. I mean, kind of. Wouldn't you say that? Like, I mean, they would. Most people would think Mormons to be Protestant, but then, like, just they would.
I don't know enough about Mormonism, really.
I mean, they just put them in this category of cult, right? Like, what was Joseph Smith?
Well, I mean, and some. I mean, they're Protestant in terms of like not being Catholic,
Yeah.
but they don't like none of the Reformation pillars really are a big deal in Mormon theology. They certainly aren't sola scriptura. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I don't think they don't seem to be very. I mean, I don't really know their theology all that well, but at least culturally, the way they behave, I don't think they're sola fide either. And then they have that whole baptism for the dead thing going on, and seem to have some universalist inclinations. So they don't. I mean, they don't seem to really fit the Protestant mold neatly either. But anyway,
we're such a weird group of people.
we're the weirdest. We're the weirdest.
What are we talking about?
It's my fault.
No, it's good. I think
I did want to bring up one thing about these miracles that you guys are talking about. I feel like a school teacher right now. All right, class.
Yeah. You really have the two unruly ones here too. The most disruptive.
But no, I'm thinking, because I'm remembering how J.P. Marceau talked about these miracles. So the miracles at the beginning of Christ's ministry were more earthbound miracles. They were healings, and they were more like possible things like water turning into wine, which is a physical thing that can happen, right? but it's compressed. So it's like Michael talks about this data compression. The miracle is a natural phenomenon that happens very quickly, so it's compressed. But then there's in the second half of his ministry, there are these, supernatural miracles where, there's walking on water, there's loaves and fishes, there's all these, and those are somehow representative, according to Marceau, of the new creation, right? They're
Right.
speaking about that, and I don't know if that changes anything that we just said or talked about, but I'm thinking about that because and he gets this from, I think he gets this from Miracles from C.S. Lewis. This is when he's talking. Yeah, go ahead.
I think no, but because I think that sort of plays into the whole like the already and not yetness of the kingdom, right? Like where it's like it's available for participation now, and yet.
Well, I mean, yeah, but I mean, like if you're talking about the infinite being contained within the finite as incarnation, I mean, to me, incarnation.
I think when you say incarnation, kingdom of God, and the paradox of the infinite containing or the finite containing the infinite, you're kind of talking about the same thing.
Right.
Ultimately,
you are.
It's all the same mystery.
I would even go as far as to say that that's what we are.
Yes, it is. That's right. That's why the kingdom of God is within you.
Right. So, well, not only that, but we're the body. Like, so it's like.
And Luke, you talked about the faith like a mustard seed earlier. Well, there's like the mustard seed, like to the mind of an ancient, that has a connection to death. Let's not forget that. So
how so?
Because a seed is a dead thing that's buried in the ground and then brings forth life. Yeah. So the seeds are always connected to death.
I have my own little theory about the mustard seed thing. Do you want to hear it?
Yeah, go for it.
Totally off topic. But I think Jesus was saying that you can't have it, that you actually just don't have it in you to have that tiny amount of faith, because the way I read that verse one day, it was like, he said, if you had the faith of a mustard seed, you could move a mountain. And I mean, yeah, I could be totally wrong, right?
Right. No, but I think I don't think you're wrong at all, because that's exactly what I was trying to hint at, is like that somehow like there's a connection, like embracing your own death as not something to be like dreaded or feared or avoided, but like the gateway to life. Like that's what
live or I die, everything is Christ. I mean,
well, see, this is
right.
Like,
and that's where this is. And that's where that, right, exactly. Yeah. I'm sorry.
If you do a classical interpretation of that, like growing up in the denomination I did, it was, you just have to have more faith and then you can move mountains. And mountains, mountains could be, a new job or, a marriage problem, they turn into euphemisms, right? And I'm like, well, wait a minute, let's really, like, now we're getting arbitrary. Okay. Now we're starting to make up our own story here. And I think Jesus is saying something flat out. He's saying, if you had the faith of a mustard seed, you could move a mountain, and you don't. That's what he said.
Right.
Let's not make this pretty, okay?
But a mustard seed isn't. But a mustard seed isn't afraid to go into the ground and sprout forth into new life.
Right.
So it's like literally, he's asking you to put yourself in the position of the mustard seed. The mustard seed knows the mystery that you don't.
Right.
Yes. And if you had the faith that the mustard seed had, you could move mountains.
Right.
Because nothing, nothing would stand in your way, because
And maybe you
you
will
would have no more, you would have no more fear, you would have no more anxiety, you would have,
Right.
and
you
maybe
would,
you will have
you would cease to be dead and become alive. You'd be born
Well,
again.
yeah, well,
follow the mustard.
Be the mustard seed.
When you follow the mustard seed, like you will be as the mustard seed, and then you die, and then that is the gateway.
yes, 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 yes. Okay, nice. Yeah.
I mean, that's, and then really, like, that's where I think, I mean, this,
Everybody thought about the quantitative aspect of the mustard seed, the size of it
Right.
equaling the size of their faith, but it was the quality of the mustard seed that
Exactly.
Jesus was talking about.
Yeah. This is a mistake we keep getting. This is the mistake we keep making. Like we keep,
We keep
getting fixated on quantity. Like,
it's linear.
and I think because
why.
it's countable and possessible, that's why.
Yeah,
Like it's
linear.
even like I mean, honestly, the only reason people think that the Trinity is hard, I'm going to say something really radical. The Trinity isn't hard.
No.
When you quantitate, when you predicate oneness or threeness of God, you are not predicating a quantity.
no.
It has nothing to do with quantity.
What you're saying,
God is qualitatively one and qualitatively three.
I was saying this in the box the other day, and I wasn't specifically talking about the Trinity, I don't think, so, which is amazing because I usually am. But it was something like, I think sometimes the things that are the hardest, I mean, I was quoting Ayn Rand, but sometimes the hardest things to get people to see is the thing that everyone has decided not to see. Sometimes things are so simple that we just like think they're complex, and they're not complex. They're not, it's so basic. And this is where I've said this before. I think everybody believes in the Trinity. Like if you're alive, you believe in the Trinity. If you are participating in being, as far as I'm concerned, you believe in the Trinity. In the sense,
no, don't say believe. I don't. Well, then again, we're going to get all caught up in that. But they're participating in the Trinity, but they just
believe in the sense that I mean. This is why I like to talk about the difference between thinking and believing.
Okay,
Right.
okay.
Let's hear about the difference between thinking and believing.
Yeah.
Well, thinking is this. Thinking is the thing that's in your head. It's the thing that it's the abstraction, it's the ideas, it's the things that you can articulate. It's the, but belief, this is like on one of the 4 YouTube videos that I've done is on Mosaic Vision. Belief is entailed with your whole being, your whole body, which is your whole soul. I mean, even because like you could think about it in terms of morphic fields, and that your body is in your soul, which includes your thoughts, all your sense perception, your intuition, your past, your present, your future. That is your belief. Your belief is everything about you that orients. Your belief is your being. And so, and this is why I say it's kind of a tautology. This is why I say anyone who is being believes in the Trinity, because that's what being is.
It's how you exist.
Yes, there isn't existence outside of the Trinity. It's the life-creating Trinity. This is what we say in the liturgy, and it's necessary for dynamism, because otherwise, like, this is why I say like Unitarianism, or like the kind of Judaism that I think Jacob talks about is like it's stasis.
Well, okay, so if you want to, remember I told you I had woke up at 4 a.m. and I had all this stuff going in my head.
Yeah.
And so anything that's in relationship, right? Any two things you have to have two things to have a relationship, but those two things always produce a third thing, right? Like you don't have a relationship from which nothing emerges ever.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. What would that even look like?
Right.
Which is what qualitative threeness is an expression of.
Right.
It's it is expressing that this is what the idea of the Trinity is. It's expressing the fact that God is both it is both threeness and oneness in his relationality.
Yeah.
Well, and this is where like I'll give Sam credit, because Sam, I didn't really understand to the degree that I understand it now. I didn't really understand this stuff before I started interacting with Sam a lot, and he really pressed me on things because, well, and I don't want to go here too deep because it gets really esoteric, but this is where like I would say, and we've had these conversations, that God in and of himself, God the Father. When I say God, I'm talking about God the Father, usually, unless I try to really clarify, because Sam has colonized me that way. So like when I say God, I'm talking about God the Father. But God in and of himself doesn't have being.
Mhm.
Like he doesn't, because he's one. There is no being in God in and of himself.
And
However,
it's important to note that you use the word have there, right?
right. Well, and he's
Because you can't, if you you can't have that which you are.
Yes.
It's just
like
what you
talking
are. It's just what you are.
That's
having something external to yourself, right?
Yeah.
Right. So we have being by
Yes.
participation. It's the only way we exist.
Right. But God, but then I
Is
say, like this is kind of somewhat just of a thought experiment, because God in and of himself has no existence, and he was never by himself, because there would be no, like there was always, this is why within all of the historic creeds and wording we talk about like eternal begetting and co-eternal son and all these things, because there is no dynamism and being in anything without son and spirit. And so very technically there was no before God. Was there ever a point when God was
there's
by,
nothing linear about the idea of eternity.
huh?
There's nothing linear about the idea of eternity
No.
for starters. Like eternity has always been linked to the idea of the now. Always. In terms of like symbolically. Now you can, however, you can conceive of the infinite. You can imagine the infinite as like as a succession, of just adding one and then adding one again, and but the problem with
what if you use the term procession, which is the preferred term in Orthodoxy, right? That the Son proceeds from.
proceeds, right? I'm just trying to draw a distinction between the infinite and the eternal right now,
Okay. Oh, okay.
because there's a difference.
hmm
But yeah, it's probably a sidetrack. I'll just leave that for now. So
The thing that's so hard about the Trinitarian conversations is I love them. I'll have them forever, and I think they're very interesting to me. But I honestly think, like, unless you just think and talk about this stuff all the time, it just seems like such esoteric nonsense
no,
bullshit.
acting in a Trinitarian manner is what matters.
Yeah, right.
Like trying to act as an agent, which mediates between unity and multiplicity,
Right.
and holding them in tension.
And this is where at least I think, and I think you're here too, Sherry, but like Nate, you and I, this is where we get into like perennialist universalism, is because I'm just like, I don't, like, use whatever words you want to use. Like, I might think those are stupid words to use, but
Yeah.
like, if you are, this is why all this is synonymous with me. If you are living in health, and not just for yourself, but for your family, your community, your nation, in these concentric patterns that like Jordan Peterson talks about. And if you're loving, and if it's full of life, if you are manifesting love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control, if you're manifesting all that stuff in your life, I don't give a shit about your propositions. Like,
Right. And who doesn't? I mean, honestly, who doesn't know that? Who really doesn't know that?
I don't think anyone, in the sense that I'm talking about, believe. People will think they don't know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
throw the thinking out of it, because the thinking just
Right. People will say then they'll start going down this discursive path.
do you know why? You know why people get caught up with their thinking?
Huh?
You know
A
why
fe-
people get caught up with their thinking? Because they can possess it. It's
Yeah.
my idea.
Yeah.
It's my thought. It's
And it's all,
my system.
Egoic intellect. It's time
Yes.
to ego.
yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yeah.
it's just and that's what gets you into, and I don't know, there's something about it. That's why those conversations that's when I start to get really frustrated. If I try to participate in those conversations, what I call non-talking talking, where people are just engaging in this thinking and all these and like this and that, I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is such an utter waste of time. Like I feel like
Well, you know what I see
I
oftentimes.
can do it, but I much prefer conversations that don't have those characteristics,
I'm not.
where it's just like people are just excited about exploring ideas together and trying to see what they can see.
I often say this, that you have to be willing to know something that you don't want to know,
Yeah.
right? Because not something that you don't know, but that you don't want to know.
Mm.
Because it's precisely that thing that you don't want to know, that you are, that's the thing that you're wielding, right? You're defending against, and that's a position of fear.
Right.
That's one of my Joseph Campbell. The cave you fear to enter holds the answer that you seek.
Right.
Yeah.
One of his-
Yeah, you don't want to know it, and so
Yeah.
you don't go in the cave, and that's where all the treasure is to be found, right? So
Yeah.
you actually, and this goes back to what we were talking about earlier when you were talking about Mary. I think one of the things about Mary, is that she also had, and I used to say this all the time to my kids, when you know that God is real, and you live knowing that no matter what, he's gonna care for you, then everything you receive is a gift, right? So you start to operate in gratitude, but you can also wait expectantly, right? And not in a name it and claim it kind of way. Like, you don't know when, and you don't know what, and you've already learned that it might not be the right thing, or the thing that you're thinking about, right, at the time that you think it should come.
So I want to tie this to something very personal and just get your guys' opinions as
Okay.
parents.
Yeah.
So with my kids are all very like me in certain ways and like their mom in certain ways, our adopted daughter, but they get very like they love fun experiences and birthdays. Like we've actually limited their birth. Like we're like you can only talk about your birthday for the month of your birthday. You just can't talk about it all year. Like, we're gonna limit it just to the month. And they get so excited, and they'll like want to talk about this, and they anticipate this stuff. And I'm so much like that. Like I just made a list the other day of all the restaurants I want to go to. Just I have this running list that then my wife can just go to on a date, and we can just be like, these are all places that I'm just excited to go. And they'll remember like meals from years ago, and they all like think about this stuff and want to have this fun. But even like my daughter just got braces the other day, and this is what I'm illustrating, a particular of a spiritual pattern that happens in all my kids. So like we went to get braces, and she mentioned on the way out a few times, just like, and we're gonna get ice cream after, right? We're gonna get ice cream, and she's just talking about getting ice cream afterwards. And I found, and I don't know what this is. This maybe just has to do with my own psychology, but it's maybe tied to what you were just talking about, which is when, and I don't know, it's maybe a bad thing on my part, but when my kids like anticipate and ask for stuff and are almost expectant of certain things, I'm it almost like strips all the fun out of it, and I'm less excited to give it to him, and I
Yeah.
don't even maybe want to. Like it almost makes it just like well, this isn't even fun. Like you're just
Yeah.
it's like a sense of entitlement almost.
Yeah.
This is where like if my kids never asked me for anything, like I would probably like I would just be doing that kind of stuff all the time, and then it would be really fun for me. And so I don't know. Sometimes I wonder, like, is that connected to what you were just saying? And
No,
Yeah.
and this is going to be a really weird connection, Luke. But what it's connect it. Okay, so the reason you have that reaction to it is it's connected to the same reason that like in the Arthurian stories, the knights would go out to quest for whatever adventure presented itself.
hmm,
So it's like you don't you have to it the proper spiritual attitude is to not have an expectation, but just be waiting for the the potential apocalypse that each moment contains to reveal itself to you.
Yeah.
So when you get fixated on like a particular thing, I'm not saying that it's like awful or anything. It's just like, but it is like when you're too much like anticipating a particular event on the horizon, you get fixated on that and you're not ready for what presents itself in the moment.
right, and it becomes I don't know. To me, it becomes then it feels transactional. Like the expectation feels transactional, where I'm just like, um, I don't know. It just feels like it's the opposite of the Franz Jägerstätter or I've learned contentedness in all things. It's just like God is good and He's going to give you what you need.
I'll give you a dumb little everyday example from my life of this, right? Okay. So like for whatever reason, it's like I'm at my best sometimes when I just like go to the market and look and see what's there and um buy what looks good, and I have no plan whatsoever. I just go into the market, I buy what looks good and in season and looks excellent, and I just make it up, and then I come or not even that. It's just like, okay, there's no plan for dinner tonight. Like what do I have on hand? What can I put together from this like random set of stuff that I have on hand?
Uh-huh.
Like I do some of my best cooking under those circumstances where
Yeah.
it's like there was no plan at all. There was no plan at all. And I just work with what I have. So there's a certain like limitation, but it's not like a plan limitation. Whereas it's like
But
if
you,
I'm actually just, you know, and here, the funny thing is though, even though my family knows this, they're still resistant. They're still resent. They're still resistant, even though they'll all tell you it's like, yeah, when dad just goes in and makes some random thing, it's oftentimes like the best thing ever. But but the inclination is still the plan.
Sure, you had something.
well, I like talking about that in terms of constraint and the beauty of constraint and creativity, right?
Yeah.
And you could also tie it back into scarcity, right? You could tie that back into being afraid of scarcity or being eagerly expectant at what
It's kind of a mundane.
what
It's
kind
actually
of
kind of a mundane demonstration of the illusion of scarcity too, right? Because
Right?
it's like there's a perceived scarcity. It's like, oh, we only have this and this and this. It's like there's nothing to be made out of
right.
this, and it's like, oh yeah, you think that?
What were you going to say, Luke?
No, I mean it's essentially what Nate was just saying. It's this perceived scarcity, but then it's
Yeah.
just oh, there's nothing here. We got to go to the store. We got to figure it out. Or this is the only thing that's in season. What are we going to do with that? You know, we need to ship in, you know, flipping apples out of season from New Zealand or something. You know, rather than just living within the realm of what you are and allowing that to be the manifest the beauty that's there because
which
there's
is ultimately the infinite being contained within the finite, right at that moment, because it's creative.
Right.
Yeah.
because it's
Well,
creative.
yeah. Well, creativity is like,
Yeah.
creativity is a big deal. Like, I don't
It
really
is.
think I ultimately think that creativity and spirituality are ultimately the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
or imagination. I mean, this, I don't know. I would,
right.
maybe that's a conversation I'd love to have. I'm gonna have to go,
Yeah,
but
no problem.
imagination is this thing that, um, I don't know, it's tied to that Graham Greene quote that I love to quote all the time, which is hate is a lack of imagination. And then I like to add on to it that God has the best imagination. And that I
Yeah.
like that as like a little, that's like my little proof aphorism of
Yeah.
universalism. But imagination is one of those things, and that gets into all sorts of
You
interesting
know what,
stuff.
creativity, love, and imagination. This is just,
We
let me
touched
off.
on it.
What they have in common is that they are open to the vision of what is possible.
Well, we actually remember, Nate, in that conversation with Jess, we got into that right at the end. It was so good.
Yeah.
We talked about the infinity of the imagination, right? Of how you can't exhaust it,
Right.
and that how making a choice as to what you're going to do with your imagination, like where you're going to implement it in a creative move, like
So
let's
you
say,
just okay, let's just circle this back around, since Luke needs to leave anyway.
yeah,
You've just actually given a demonstration of how, in fact, the infinite is in fact contained within the
right,
finite, and it is in the human imagination,
yes, yeah,
because
yeah,
the human imagination is in fact actually infinite, even though it's contained within this little finite mortal package.
yeah,
Well, and it's
yeah.
fundamentally connected to vision too, which is
Well,
I
that's
really want to have that conversation with Jess about art and vision and the illustrations that book was having, because it's really like,
Well,
yeah,
it's all of this is connected. It all has to do with, like, how do we live together in love? How do we overcome scarcity? How do we encourage human flourishing across all dimensions and not just the material? All those things are connected.
yeah, yeah.
All right. I guess that's
Okay.
we'll call it a wrap.
Yeah, that was fun, guys. I'm glad
Thank
I
you for
joined.
joining me.
Bye bye.